Hey there, guys. So I want to thank you, as always, for taking the time to join today's live stream. So, in this live stream, I'm doing things a little bit differently, where I'm going to be sharing this primarily in my actual Facebook page. And the reason being why I'm doing this is so that I can sort of expand my audience outside of my Facebook group. So that's why you'll see this mainly on my official Facebook page so that I can share it to other people who may not normally see the content that I share in my Facebook group. And I want to make a lot of this content a little bit more accessible. So, if you have any questions, of course, as you're watching this, feel free to let me know. If you've not watched my streams before, definitely and share your feedback on how you feel about what I discuss in this stream. But with all that being said, what you can expect today is, of course, common mistakes that are preventing muscle gain, and share your
As we're
feedback on
talking
how
about
you
this
feel
topic,
about. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure my stream is together, and that's why I keep looking off screen. So, as we're talking about this topic, and really going over it, feel free to let me know of any questions that you have about what I'm discussing today. So, when it comes to this topic, there's many things I'm going to go over, but before I get started, what I do want to mention is that you can check out my website, which is bponlinefitness.com, where you can check out a bunch of information as it relates to online fitness coaching and really learn more about what I have to offer as it relates to anything related to fitness and nutrition, as well as how I can help you reach your fitness goals through online fitness coaching. So, there is also ways you can sign up to my email newsletter there. You can also check out my free fitness blog that I upload to each and every week. So let's go ahead and get started. With all that being said, so again, we're going to be talking about the common mistakes preventing muscle gain. So in this topic, there's going to be different points that I'm going to go over, and these are going to be the different points that I'm going to specifically discuss and really dissect to give you an idea on what you can do to change how you approach each and every one of these particular, sort of sticking points as it relates to accomplishing a fitness goal. So, the first topic here is that you're lifting heavy, not eating enough, sleep and recovery, training hard but staying the same, skipping the details, and there will be more points that I will go over outside of these six. So, or outside of these five, I should say. So, let's go ahead and get started with the point of your lifting too heavy. So, this is a very common mistake that happens as it relates to you know, muscle gain and just the overall process of really trying to progress in workouts. So, a lot of people associate progress with lifting heavy, but that's not necessarily the case in a lot of ways. And the reason being is that this can actually hurt progress if you're not strategic with how you approach this. So, why this can hurt progress when it relates to lifting heavy? So, this can reduce your time under tension. Time under tension is something that I've talked about many times before. Basically, what that means is that you're spending more time performing the workout. You're basically going through a full range of motion. You're staying under the weight for a longer amount of time to activate the muscle more effectively. That's basically what time under tension is. And when you're lifting heavy weights, you're likely not giving yourself enough time to go through the full range of motion, so you might be cutting your reps short. So this shifts focus from target muscles to stabilizers. So there's different muscles that are being worked as it relates to these different points. So stabilizer muscles actually assist the main muscle that is being targeted. So the target muscle, for example, if we're targeting the biceps, that is the specific muscle that we're targeting. But there's also assisting muscles helping with performing a specific movement as well. And that's what the stabilizers are. This also increases injury risk, which stalls training entirely. So when you get injured, that's going to take time away from the training you could be doing. So keep that in mind that this is really important to be aware of, especially when you're focusing on, that progression. If you go to where you're gonna, lift really heavy and then you have an injury, that's going to lead to, taking time off. And of course, it's going to stall your progression that you could be having if you were strategic with how you're lifting the weights. So the problem here is that lifting too heavy limits range of motion and form. It encourages ego lifting. Ego lifting is basically a term where you're just wanting to lift heavy to show off. So this is something that I've been guilty of before lifting weights. I think a lot of guys are kind of like that, where we kind of want to ego lift and we want to show off how much we can lift. But in that case, it's really not worth it for getting injured and for, just really cutting off your progress. So, controlled training is the true key when it comes to this, particular point on lifting heavy. So another problem is that this leads to momentum-based reps and not muscle engagement. Again, that goes back to having a full range of motion in your workouts and going through the full rep, going through the full duration and not cutting your reps too short. So the fix to this, of course, is choosing a weight you can control for at least 8 to 12 clean reps. Usually 8 to 12 is the good point for hypertrophy. So that's going to be a good spot to know that if you can go through the full range of motion with that particular weight, then you are, going in the right direction. Focus on form, tempo, and mind muscle connection. Again, form is, performing the workout thoroughly. Your tempo is how quickly you're going through the workout. And with the tempo, when it comes to, progression, we want to have a controlled, movement, and we want to go through that specific movement in a proper manner that leads to that progression. So another thing is mind muscle connection. Mind muscle connection is basically where you're being mindful of the muscles that you're contracting. For example, we're focusing on, let's say, like a shoulder press or anything, let's just say like a row. Like talking about like when we're doing a rowing motion and we're trying to target the back. With that row, we want to think about retracting our shoulders back. We want to think about the extension and pulling our shoulders back and really feeling that engagement in the muscle. And that's what that is when we're focusing on the mind muscle connection, thinking about that muscle actually being worked. So, another thing too is that progressive overload is not always lifting heavier. It's quality over quantity. So, I've discussed before about progressive overload, but progressive overload is there's way more to it than just lifting heavy. It's basically there's many different ways that you could do progressive overload. It could be, increasing your reps each time. It could also be spending more time under tension, which means going through the rep in a slower manner in order to, you know, activate the muscle for a longer period of time and engage the muscle longer. That's another form of progression. So another thing could be another set of workouts. Maybe you're doing 3 sets, you can move up to 4. So there's different things that you can do to progress. So the next point here is not eating enough. This is one of the most common mistakes that people make, I think, mostly when it comes to especially gaining muscle, because this was something that I kind of struggled with myself when I had first started, um, you know, getting into weightlifting and, before I became a trainer, of course. is that I wouldn't eat enough food, and I was, I didn't think about, being mindful of what I was consuming in my foods. So the problem here is that training hard but under eating, of course, is very common. Inconsistent or insufficient protein and calorie intake is really another factor that you're likely not seeing results. Relying on clean eating without meeting energy needs. So you do need to meet energy needs as much as possible, while of course still having good quality nutrients in your body. So why it hurts progress? Muscles need fuel to grow. No surplus, no gains. So when it comes to gaining muscle, your protein intake has to match your specific weight, like your actual body weight. So, for example, if you weigh 130 pounds, you need to consume at least 130 grams of protein or more in order to help aid with that muscle gain process. The same can be said for your overall calorie intake. Your calorie intake has to be higher than your normal maintenance calories. And your maintenance calories is what you would basically normally consume. So, lack of nutrients, of course, leads to poor recovery and strength plateaus. So, recovery, of course, is the process of your body, really helping to, repair the muscles post workout and really help to, it's a big part of the muscle gain process, is really the recovery side of things because the recovery is where you get the most growth. Yes, you do when you're in your workouts, you are training those muscles, you are, having micro tears in those muscles in order for them to build back. But it's the recovery process and what you give your body post workout that really matters more than anything. So if you don't have the proper nutrients, you're going to notice that you're not seeing as much progress. So this can lead to muscle loss, but this can lead to muscle loss, not just stalled growth. So, of course, the fix to this is eating in a slight calorie surplus, 250 to 500 extra calories per day. So, what you would normally consume, in a day to day, and that's something that you would have to do yourself. You would have to really track your calories and see what you consume. If consuming the calories you've been, consuming over a period of time is not getting you muscle gain, then that means you need to adjust your intake in some way. So keep that in mind that you need to go roughly higher. Of course, a surplus is more than what you would normally consume. Again, prioritize protein 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Another thing that's what I mentioned as far as your protein, if you can keep it at that amount to where it matches, your actual, body weight, that's going to help as well. Track your intake. This is the most important thing that I think a lot of people do not do. It's extremely important to track your nutrition and really be aware of what you're consuming. This can be said in the same way when it comes to tracking workouts. You need to track workouts as well. But this is another thing that many people lack and they wonder why they're not getting results. And a lot of it has to do with just these minor things that they're not doing. Tracking, even though it doesn't seem significant in any way, it makes a difference in how you're seeing results because you're actually seeing what you're consuming. When you see what you're consuming and you're having a, it may take time for you to actually add up that data, but once you're seeing that data and you're saying, okay, this is likely where I need to make a change because I'm lacking in protein. I may be lacking in carbs. There's different things that you can see when it comes to really identifying what you need to change. So, moving on to the next point, and this is another really big point that I think a lot of people aren't aware of, and that comes to the topic of sleep and recovery. So, this is an extremely important part of the muscle recovery process as well. So, common sleep related mistakes. Having an inconsistent sleep schedule. This actually disrupts hormonal balance and recovery cycles. Too few hours, so less than 7 hours of sleep a night, inadequate time for full sleep cycles and tissue repair. So, one thing I do want to mention when it comes to sleep is that your body actually goes through various stages. And one of the stages that your body has the maximum amount of recovery is actually the deep sleep stage. And this doesn't happen too often. For example, I track my sleep, very often just so I have a good, indicator on, if I'm struggling in my process of, my particular goal, because I'm working on even though I'm a trainer, I'm working on my own particular goals at the same time. So I have to monitor many of my individual, tracking metrics, just like anybody else that I train. So sleeping is one of those things that I track. And again, the reason being is that if I get, let's say, again, like I mentioned, with all these factors, such as, tracking nutrition, tracking weights, and tracking sleep, when I'm tracking all this data, if I get to a point to where I feel like I'm plateauing and that I'm not seeing progression, I have data that I can go back to and I can say, and I can look at this and I can say, okay, what's the issue? What's the issue that is setting me back? Is it my sleep? Is it my nutrition? Or is it my workouts? And I can look at that and I can say, okay, this is what I need to change. And that's why I'm mentioning about tracking why it's so important. And again, you don't necessarily have to, you know, really get intricate with this. It's just about having the habit of getting a really good indicator on what you're doing as it relates to your workouts, your nutrition, and your sleep. Again, you don't have to have everything to a T. What matters is that you're getting some form of data. And once you start to build the habit of tracking, it becomes second nature and you don't really think about it, you just do it. So going back to this, I just wanted to mention because tracking is very important. A lot of people, again, wonder why they're not getting results, and they don't have any data to back up why they're not getting results. And that's what makes it hard to even progress if you don't have that. So, another point here is late night stimulants. This could be caffeine. This could be, watching TV before you sleep, or this can be being on your phone before you sleep. This actually delays melatonin release and reduces sleep quality. Overtraining without rest. So this elevates cortisol, which is basically a stress hormone, and this is going to decrease that deep sleep quality. That's what I just mentioned just a few moments ago about deep sleep, is where a lot of your repair, even though you don't get a lot of deep sleep, like for me, usually the amount of deep sleep that I'll get throughout a whole duration is usually 20 minutes or roughly 30 minutes. Even though that doesn't seem like it's that significant, it makes a difference because that period of time is where a lot of, it even helps with cognitive function and brain function in a lot of ways too. But keep in mind that if you're getting, it's going to help that if you're getting adequate, having an adequate sort of nighttime regimen, you're going to get more quality deep sleep if you keep that in mind, especially too, like your training. If you're overtraining, that's going to prevent that deep sleep quality. And overtraining, of course, is really, this is like working out 7 days a week and not giving your body rest. That's basically what you would describe and define as overtraining. Ignoring the sleep environment. So noise, light, or heat can interfere with restorative sleep. So having the optimal sleep environment is important. So to optimize your sleep regains, again, it's very simple. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep, consistent bedtime and wake time. This is something that I do as well. I usually go to the bed at the same time each night and I'll wake up at the same time each morning. Building that schedule is important too. No screens an hour before bed, and this can be shorter. It could be 30 minutes. A lot of times this actually doesn't affect me, even though I do, I'll watch things before I go to bed. but I usually have a winding down time, usually roughly 30 minutes before I go to sleep. So having a time to wind down, I think helps a lot too as well. So having a cool, dark, quiet room set up. Include rest days in your training, of course, in your training plan. So having at least two is optimal, especially, if you're training, 5 or 4 days a week. So continuing on here, the next point is training hard but the same. So anyone can train hard, but training hard without purpose, structure, and recovery leads to frustration, not growth. So if you want real muscle gains, you have to be consistent, you have to eat to grow, you have to prioritize recovery, and you have to stick to the plan. Progress with intent. So you want to train hard, but you also want to train smart at the same time. So that's how you turn effort into an evolution. So when it comes to, the process of training, as far as weightlifting and weight training, have a proper plan. Focus on the process. Focus on continuously showing up. If you're not, consistent in your workouts, that's another factor that's going to prevent you from growth. So it's all of these different key points to be aware of and to understand, and you can use these points as a way to understand why you're not getting results. So skipping the details. So respect your rest days. This is very important, especially if you're somebody who's very into working out, like I am. So if you start to get that sort of, good feeling when it comes to exercising, getting endorphins from exercising, you start to get into this mode to where you just want to work out every day. But the thing is that you do have to have a good balance in how you approach, your workout routine. And rest days are important. So more isn't always better. Overtraining again stalls progress fast. Active recovery like walking, stretching, or light cardio keeps your body moving and without draining your tank. So having active recovery days, rest days is going to be beneficial. And again, active recovery is doing light cardio on a rest day, it's doing stretching, mobility exercises on a rest day. Training with intent. So go beyond just moving weight. Every rep should have a purpose, controlled form, and solid tension, as well as a full range of motion. So you don't want to have sloppy reps. That's not going to build muscle. Focus on what you're doing in your reps. Go through the full range of motion. Have a controlled movement. Be mindful of what you're doing. It's very important to really be aware of that. Prioritize compound movements. Start your workouts with the big lifts such as squats, deadlifts, bench presses, overhead presses, pull ups, and rows. These recruit the most muscles and give you the best return on effort. Save oscillations like curls and leg extensions for later. So, compound exercises I've talked about before, but basically, what compound exercises are, or compound movements, are basically movements that are using a large amount of muscles all at once. Whereas when we're focusing on oscillation, we're targeting one specific muscle. Like a bicep curl is an example of an oscillation exercise. Whereas, like the squats and deadlifts, those are compound because they're using large muscle groups together to perform the workout. So that's what the compound movements are. So those are very important to include in your routine. Embrace progressive overload. Muscles adapt over time to challenges. You need to keep increasing the stress. This could be more weight, more reps, or more time under tension. Again, it doesn't have to be just weight. There's different ways that you can progress without having to rely on increasing weight over time. So track your lifts, again, tracking what you're doing, and push yourself to improve something every week. Your best workout achievements showcasing their skills and expertise. I apologize, I didn't, the your in there is not spelled correctly, of course, but you get the idea of what I'm talking about here. So, again, being mindful of progressive overload, tracking your workouts, focusing on progressing in a small way, no matter what, it doesn't have to be a large amount. Progressing little by little, using incremental weights like 2.5 pounds, anything like that. If you're progressing, you're progressing. So think about that and just think about some minor changes that you can make that could move you forward, in your next workout. So the next point here is skipping warm-ups and mobility. And this is the other extra points that I wanted to discuss. I won't touch on them for too long, but I do want to mention these points. So what happens when you skip it? So cold muscles can actually lead to higher risk of injury, poor joint prep, limited range of motion, weak muscle activation leads to less power and less growth, and then compensation, other muscles are taking over. So when you do a warm up and a mobility, sort of exercises before you're getting started with your workout, it's going to help a lot of ways to prepare any of those muscles you're targeting that specific day. So what you want to do when you're doing a warm up is including exercises that, you're going to be engaging, light stretches that you're going to be engaging with that particular muscle, that particular, workout day. So why it matters for muscle growth. So primed muscles fire harder, so better lifts happen when you include warm-ups in your routine. You also improve movement quality, deeper squats, and smoother presses. Injury prevention is also important. More consistency in training, of course. This, prevents you from having those days to where you get injured and it takes time for you to get back into the routine. Boost mind muscle connection before your first rep because you're prepared for your workout and you are getting having a warm up in your overall workout. You're thinking about what you can do in your overall other workouts as you're preparing to get ready for those. So it's just giving you a more mind muscle connection when you include these in your routine. So the next point is why lean gains need a surplus. This is going back to the aspect of a calorie surplus. So, what a surplus actually means. Again, this is a slight calorie increase, 250 to 400, or excuse me, 500 extra per day of your overall maintenance calories or how many calories you normally consume. Prioritize protein 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Focus on quality carbs and healthy fats to support training and hormones. Quality carbs includes complex carbs. Think of those as what you should choose. This is like brown rice, quinoa, anything of that sort is going to be, labeled as a complex carb. Another option, of course, is healthy fats. This can include avocados, chia seeds, flaxseed, anything of that sort. Olive oil is going to be considered more of a healthy fat. Tracked, controlled, so not a dirty bulk. Make sure you're basically, incorporating quality nutrients in your diet and not just trying to get the maximum amount of calories. So what happens without a surplus? So without a surplus, you're going to have slow recovery, plateaued strength, no significant muscle growth, and frustration despite training really hard. So again, the reason why I'm showing this and going over again here is because calorie intake, and macros are extremely important to that muscle gain process. And you need to really zero in on this if you really want to see changes in results. So the scale obsession trap, this is another point I think is very important. And I think people get really, really caught up in because results happen outside of the scale. They happen in different ways. So what you're likely doing when you're in this sort of mode of the scale obsession trap is that you're checking the scale daily. You're letting the number define your progress or mood. You're equating weight gain with fat gain, and you're ignoring how you look, feel, and perform. So keep in mind that it's not just about the scale, that there's many different factors that you can incorporate to sort of see progression. Even though you may not be seeing progression at the moment, there are different changes it could be how you feel. It could be, doing minor measurements of, different parts of your body to see that progression in a different way. It's not just about the weight in the scale. So track progress the right way. Progress photos. This could be weekly or bi-weekly. Measurements, weight, chest, hips, and arms. So measurements, this is something that I mentioned. If I have somebody that's interested in, doing online coaching, one thing I always mention is that measurements can be a good factor for seeing progression. And it's outside of just, relying on that body weight. When you see progress, we all are really geared towards weight on a scale, but when you see progress in a different way, it gives you a different viewpoint on, how you're reaching your goal. Strength and performance markers. So if you're getting stronger, if you're hitting, personal best, then that means that you are getting stronger. You're progressing in some way. If you feel like you're able to run more or run longer than you normally could before, that's another example of progression in some way. How your clothes fit, that's another one. If you fill out your clothes more than you used to and you wear a different size now, that's another factor. So body scale lies sometimes. So water retention, post leg day, there's a spike. Post leg day, there's not a spike in fat. Food volume, gut content does not equal to body fat. Muscle is denser than fat, so gaining muscle loses inches. That's another thing to keep in mind. Hormones, stress, and sleep all affect short term weight. So, again, you can put that into consideration as well, whether you're not seeing progress and those different short term things that happen. Our body weight fluctuates and it can change pretty often. But again, keep these other factors in mind. The progress photos, the measurements, seeing those performance markers make a really big difference. Alrighty, guys. So that is all I have for you today. I hope that you guys find this helpful and valuable or found this helpful and valuable. I will have this shared onto my YouTube channel, and you can also check out this video will also be uploaded again to my website, which is bponlinefitness.com. Again, check that out if you guys have any questions as it relates to online coaching or learning a little bit more about fitness and nutrition with a ton of free resources on there as well. So, one thing I do want to mention before I close this out today is that I do actually have a new video on my YouTube channel, which I've not yet to share, and I've been busy. I've uploaded it, but I haven't shared it outside of YouTube just yet, because I get caught up in everything else. But there's a new video that's not a live stream. This is a new video that I've recorded that talks about understanding healthy fats or dietary fats. And you can check that out now. I just uploaded it yesterday. So that's available to view on my YouTube channel. This will be on there as well. If you do want the link to my YouTube channel, feel free to let me know. But again, guys, I really thank you for your time for checking this live stream out. And I really look forward to helping you if you're really interested in learning more about online coaching. So thank you guys for watching.